Imagine you're listening to a piece of music you've loved for years. It's familiar, comforting, a song that carries memories with every note. A soft piano chord rises, delicate and shimmering, and as you hear it, a pale blue seems to spread across your awareness, as if the sound itself has painted the air. A low cello note follows. It feels heavier somehow, not just in pitch but in sensation, like the weight of velvet pressing gently into your hands. A single high violin tone blooms bright gold, and lingers there, radiant and warm, even after the sound has faded. For some, these descriptions are just poetic metaphors. For others, they are reality. The connection between the sound and the color isn't imagined. It isn't a deliberate association. It's immediate, uninvited, and unshakable. Or picture a child opening a math workbook to a page filled with numbers. To them, each digit has a clear and unmistakable color. 2 is red, 7 is a deep forest green, 9 is plum purple. They reach instinctively for the right colored pencils, not because they've been told to, but because that's the way numbers are. When the teacher explains that the colors are random, the child is confused. How could anyone not see it? This blending of the senses is called synesthesia. It is a rare neurological phenomenon where stimulation of one sense triggers a second, involuntary sensation in another. The name comes from the Greek words syn, meaning together, and aesthesis, meaning perception. Together, they describe a joined way of experiencing the world. For the small percentage of people who have it, estimates range from 2 to 4%. Synesthesia is not something they turn on or off. It's woven into how they perceive reality itself. When a synesthete says that the letter A is red, they don't mean it sometimes feels red, or that they've chosen to think of it that way. The redness is stable and enduring, as much a part of A as its shape or sound. If a particular musical note feels like polished silver, it always will, no matter where or when they hear it. Many people with synesthesia grow up assuming their perception is completely ordinary. Childhood is filled with private certainties. Mondays feel like yellow felt. The number 4 is friendly. The taste of a peach is shaped like a teardrop. They may not speak of it often, because it's not something they realize is unusual. The truth often emerges by accident. A passing comment, like, "This song is so orange," followed by a puzzled expression from someone else, and the realization that not everyone lives in the same kind of sensory world. There are many different ways synesthesia can appear, each with its own unique signature. In some, letters and numbers each have their own color, fixed for life. A person might see a J in emerald green, a K in navy blue, and a 3 in bright yellow, whether they're printed on a page, written in the air, or just imagined in the mind. For others, sounds themselves arrive with a burst of visual form. A trumpet might spark sharp golden rays, while the hum of a refrigerator drapes a soft wash of pale gray in the mind's eye. There are those for whom words trigger tastes. A friend's name might be laced with the flavor of burnt toast, or the word Thursday might be edged with the tang of citrus. Some people see sequences like time and numbers as if they were laid out in physical space, months arranged in a perfect circle around them, or the years of their life stretching in a winding three-dimensional path. And in certain cases, even abstract things like letters or days of the week seem to have personalities. Monday might be stubborn, the number 5 might be shy, and August might be loud and brash. What's remarkable is not only that these perceptions exist, but that they are consistent and involuntary. A synesthete doesn't choose the taste of a word or the color of a number, any more than someone chooses the smell of rain or the blue of the sky. And once the association is there, it remains constant over time. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand how and why this blending happens. One of the leading explanations is called the cross-activation theory. In the brain, sensory processing areas are arranged in a complex map, often with related functions located near each other. In the visual cortex, for instance, the region responsible for recognizing letters and numbers sits close to the area that processes color. In most people, these areas communicate only when needed. But in synesthetes, there may be extra connections, like side roads linking two cities, allowing activity in one area to spill over into the other. So when the letter A is recognized, the color processing area activates as well, producing the vivid perception of red. Another possibility is that synesthesia arises from a difference in how the brain filters information. Normally, much of the sensory input we receive never reaches conscious awareness. The brain edits and simplifies, keeping each sense separate unless there's a reason to merge them. In synesthetes, this filtering may be looser, allowing signals to cross paths more freely and creating unusual sensory pairings. Advances in brain imaging have made it possible to see these processes in action. Functional MRI scans show that when a grapheme color synesthete looks at a black and white letter, their color processing regions light up as if the letter were printed in full color. This isn't a trick of the mind or a conscious association, it's visible in the very activity of their brain. It's important to understand that synesthesia is not the same as a hallucination. In a hallucination, a perception arises without any external trigger, often in the absence of the thing being perceived. Synesthesia always starts with something real, a sound, a sight, a taste, and the second sensation arrives automatically alongside it, bound to the trigger in a way that's both predictable and enduring. For scientists, synesthesia offers a rare window into the workings of perception. Most sensory experiences are private, impossible to measure directly. But because synesthetic associations are consistent over time, researchers can test and confirm them. If someone says that the number 4 is green, they will identify it as green again and again, even years later, without hesitation. This consistency allows researchers to study how the brain binds sensations together and to explore the hidden architecture of our sensory systems. For the people who live with it, synesthesia is rarely seen as a disorder. Many describe it as a gift, a deepening of perception that enriches daily life. A song might come alive with color, a word might arrive carrying the taste of cinnamon, a calendar might appear as a vivid spiral through the year. These layers of sensation can make the world feel more intricate and memorable, offering a constant undercurrent of surprise. Of course, it isn't always comfortable. The blending of senses can sometimes be overwhelming, especially in noisy or chaotic environments. Imagine walking through a crowded street and not only hearing the sounds around you, but seeing bursts of unwanted colors or shapes with every honk and shout. Certain words might carry unpleasant tastes that linger, making conversations subtly uncomfortable. But even with these challenges, many synesthetes would not give it up. To lose synesthesia would be to lose a way of experiencing reality that feels fundamental to who they are. To live with synesthesia is to inhabit a world where the senses are in constant conversation. The boundaries between sight and sound, taste and touch, space and time are not rigid lines but soft gradients, where one sensation can bleed gently into another. For those without it, the idea may seem strange or even impossible, but for those who have it, it is simply the way the world has always been. When scientists first began hearing about these experiences, many didn't quite know what to make of them. In the 19th century, psychology was still young, and the idea that someone could taste a word or see a sound seemed more like a curiosity than a subject for serious study. But there were a few who paid attention. One of the earliest documented descriptions came from Francis Gaydon, a cousin of Charles Darwin and an influential figure in the study of human perception. In 1880, Galton published a paper in the journal Nature, describing people who could visualize numbers arranged in elaborate spatial patterns. To his surprise, he found that this was not rare, at least not among the small group of people he studied. His careful accounts were among the first to treat these experiences as real phenomena worth investigating. At the time, there was no technology to peer inside the brain. Understanding relied on what people reported, and those reports were often poetic, sometimes strange, and almost always personal. In the early 20th century, a few researchers experimented with standardized tests, trying to confirm whether a person's associations stayed the same over time. They found that they did. A synesthete's description of the letter M as a deep blue would match perfectly, even a decade later. This consistency was one of the first clues that synesthesia wasn't just imagination or metaphor, it had a neurological basis. Still, for much of the 20th century, the subject was pushed to the fringes of research. In an era when psychology sought to be as objective as possible, subjective inner experiences were often seen as unreliable. Many synesthetes learned to keep their perceptions private, or to share them only with friends who wouldn't think them strange. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st century that synesthesia began to receive serious attention again. Advances in brain imaging allowed scientists to see patterns of neural activity in real time, confirming that these sensory pairings were accompanied by measurable changes in the brain. The fMRI studies that showed color processing areas activating in response to black and white letters were a turning point, visual proof that the mind's inner colors could be mapped and measured. Among the stories that brought synesthesia into the public eye were those of famous artists and musicians. The painter Wassily Kandinsky is often cited as a synesthete. His bold, abstract works inspired, he claimed, by the colors he saw in music. He wrote about the way certain notes evoked particular shades, how a violin might be light blue, or a cello, a rich, deep red. Whether every detail of his experience matches modern definitions is debated, but his work and words helped to shape the cultural image of synesthesia. The novelist Vladimir Nabokov described his graffiti synesthesia in his memoirs Speak, Memory, recalling how letters had been colored for him since childhood. His wife and son both shared the trait, though their color maps didn't match. Nabokov noted this with fascination and a little frustration. For him, the letter M was pink, for his wife it was blue. That personal detail hinted at what genetic studies now suggest. Synesthesia often runs in families, but the exact associations are unique to each person. In music, Olivier Messiaen, the 20th century French composer, openly discussed how his compositions were shaped by the colors he saw when hearing harmonies. His pieces often attempted to capture those visions in sound. In more recent years, artists like Pharrell Williams and Billie Eilish have spoken about their own synesthesia, describing how it influences the colors and textures they aim for in their songs. Hearing from those who live with it gives a clearer sense of what synesthesia is like day to day. For many, it's not a constant flood of sensation. It's background, always there, shaping how they experience the world without demanding their attention. A street musician's performance might be wrapped in gentle swirls of turquoise. The smell of coffee might quietly bring a warm, sandy brown into the mind. A friend's name might carry the faint sweetness of honey. Sometimes the experiences are intensely beautiful. A melody can feel like walking through a forest at golden hour, every note carrying its own color and temperature. Reading a page of text can be a kind of art, the letters painted in their permanent hues, each word an arrangement of colors. Even ordinary moments can be enriched. The rhythmic clatter of a train might bring a soft ripple of silver and blue, but there are moments of discomfort too. An unpleasant sound can arrive with a jarring burst of clashing colors. A word might trigger a taste that doesn't belong, metallic, bitter, or sour, and once noticed, it's hard to ignore. In crowded places, the combination of sights, sounds, and smells can feel like sensory overload, layered with colors and textures that other people never have to process. The way synesthesia influences creativity is one of its most studied aspects. Artists who see sound might compose music to match their internal color palette. Writers might choose words based on the tastes or textures they evoke. Even in science, synesthesia can be an asset. Some synesthetes use their unique associations as memory aids, linking data to colors, shapes, or spatial patterns that make recall effortless. Studies have found that certain types of synesthesia correlate with enhanced memory performance, though this is not universal. One of the fascinating things about synesthesia is how it blurs the line between the sensory and the abstract. For example, numbers are not colors in the physical world, but for a grapheme color synesthete, the link feels as real as seeing green grass. Time is not a shape, but for those with spatial sequence synesthesia, months might feel arranged in a clear geometric path that can be looked at from different angles. The brain seems capable of binding almost any concept to almost any sensory channel, creating a private, unshakable map of connections. This raises deep questions. Why do some brains develop these connections while others do not? Why should one person see an A as red and another as blue? Studies suggest a genetic component. Synesthesia often appears in multiple members of a family, but the exact mechanisms remain unknown. Some researchers think all infants may start life with a kind of cross-sensory perception that becomes more specialized with development. In that view, synesthesia could be a trace of early neural wiring that never fully separated. Whatever its origins, synesthesia challenges the idea that there's a single normal way to experience reality. It reminds us that perception is not just about what enters the senses, but about how the brain shapes, interprets, and colors those signals. For most people, music is sound, letters are shapes, numbers are quantities. For synesthetes, those boundaries are less rigid, and the world becomes a richer, sometimes stranger place because of it. In daily life, this blending often feels natural to those who have it. They may struggle to imagine what it's like not to have colors in music or tastes in words. Describing it can be tricky. The experiences are consistent, but so personal that words often fall short. And yet, by sharing their accounts, synesthetes offer a glimpse into a way of sensing that stretches the limits of what we think perception can be. Some find ways to channel it deliberately. A musician might choose a key that feels warm yellow for an uplifting song, or cool blue for something reflective. A painter might translate a favorite piece of music into colors on a canvas. Others simply live with it quietly, letting it shape their private experience of the world without feeling the need to express it outwardly. It's in these personal accounts that the beauty of synesthesia comes through most clearly, not as a novelty or an oddity, but as a lens, one that changes how someone moves through life. Whether it's the comforting shade that accompanies a beloved voice, the satisfying shape of a familiar taste, or the quiet glow that lingers in the mind after a favorite song, synesthesia offers moments of connection between the senses that feel both intimate and infinite. Some of the most intriguing questions about synesthesia still have no clear answers. One is whether it can be learned, or whether it is entirely something you are born with. Many researchers suspect it has a genetic basis, given how often it appears within families. But genetics alone doesn't explain everything. Even among siblings who share synesthesia, the specific pairings, which letters have which colors, which sounds evoke which shapes, are almost always different. One theory suggests that in early infancy, our brains may all be wired in a more cross-connected way, with the senses overlapping more than they do in adulthood. As we grow, most of those connections are pruned away, a process known as synaptic pruning, allowing each sensory system to operate more independently. In synesthetes, perhaps some of those early connections remain intact, preserving a sensory blending that others lose. There's also the possibility that some people may have the neural capacity for synesthesia, but the associations never become conscious or remain too subtle to notice. A few experiments have tried to induce temporary synesthetic experiences in people without the condition, using training, sensory deprivation, or even certain psychoactive substances. Psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin are known to sometimes cause cross-sensory perceptions, colors in music, shapes in taste. But these effects are typically chaotic, inconsistent, and short-lived, unlike the stable lifelong patterns of true synesthesia. Some training programs have shown that people can learn to associate colors with letters or sounds, and that with enough repetition, these links can become automatic. But whether this is genuine synesthesia or simply a learned habit remains debated. True synesthesia has a sense of inevitability to it. The association happens instantly, without choice or effort, and it doesn't fade with time. What makes synesthesia especially interesting to scientists is how it challenges our understanding of what perception is. We like to imagine that our senses are clear windows onto the world, each delivering a separate stream of information. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. In reality, the brain is less like a set of parallel channels and more like a web, constantly weaving signals together, comparing, enhancing, and shaping them before we're even aware of what we're experiencing. Synesthesia may simply be a more visible version of this constant sensory crosstalk, a reminder that none of our senses work in isolation. It also raises philosophical questions about the nature of reality. If one person hears middle C and sees a streak of cobalt blue, while another hears the same note and sees nothing at all, which is the real experience? In one sense, both are equally real. Each is a product of a brain interpreting the same external stimulus in its own way. Perception is never just a passive recording of the outside world. It is an active construction, shaped by biology, memory, and attention. Synesthesia makes this fact impossible to ignore. For the person living with it, synesthesia is often less about philosophical puzzles and more about the fabric of daily life. The colors in music, the textures in words, the personalities in numbers. These are constants, quiet companions in the background. But thinking about what they reveal about the brain can inspire a certain kind of wonder. If perception can differ so much from one person to another, perhaps our own experience of the world is only one of many possible versions. Some synesthetes describe moments when their perceptions align perfectly with an experience in the outer world, when a sunset matches the colors of a favorite song, or when a meal tastes exactly like the texture of a beloved word. In those moments, the line between the senses and the environment feels especially thin, as if the world itself has briefly tuned itself to the same wavelength. In recent years, synesthesia has attracted attention not just from neuroscientists but from educators, designers, and technologists. Some educators have explored whether linking information to multiple senses, as happens naturally in synesthesia, could help with memory and learning. Designers have experimented with creating synesthetic experiences for museums or concerts, translating sound into color and light, or turning visual patterns into soundscapes. While these are not the same as genuine synesthesia, they hint at how our senses can be woven together in creative ways. There's also growing interest in how synesthesia interacts with emotion. For many synesthetes, certain combinations of sensory experiences feel deeply comforting, while others are unpleasant or even overwhelming. Some report that their synesthetic perceptions shift slightly with mood. Colors might seem more vivid when happy, or textures rougher when anxious. This adds another layer of complexity, suggesting that the blending of senses is not fixed in a vacuum, but influenced by the emotional state of the person experiencing it. Despite the fascination it inspires, synesthesia remains, in many ways, a mystery. We can measure it, describe it, and even simulate aspects of it, but we still don't fully understand why it exists or why it takes the forms it does. Is it an evolutionary quirk, a byproduct of the brain's flexibility? Could it have offered some advantage in memory or creativity? Or is it simply one of the many variations in how human brains can be wired, no more or less unusual than differences in musical pitch perception or spatial reasoning? What's clear is that for those who have it, synesthesia is not something they would willingly part with. It is woven into how they think, how they remember, and how they create. It colors not just their senses but their memories and imaginations, giving them a private, endlessly layered way of moving through the world. And for the rest of us, learning about it is a reminder that reality is not a single, shared picture, but a mosaic of countless individual worlds, each shaped by the senses and by the brain's quiet, constant work of weaving them together. If you close your eyes and listen to a favorite piece of music, you might notice small connections you've never paid attention to before. A way the sound makes you imagine a certain shape, or a color that flickers briefly in the background of your mind. These are ordinary moments, fleeting and subtle, but they're also a hint that the line between the senses is never entirely firm. Somewhere in the tangle of your brain's wiring, there are paths that could lead to another way of experiencing, another version of reality. As the last notes fade, you might picture them lingering in the air, wrapped in a shimmer of light, carrying with them the thought that perhaps in some way, all our senses are already joined. And synesthesia is simply the place where that connection becomes visible.